the censorship regime has as its primary advocates and activists the people who are listed as journalists in the nation's largest media corporations. It is the liberal journalists at the New York Times and CNN and the Washington Post and Vice and BuzzFeed and the rest who have been largely responsible for demanding that big tech companies censor in accordance with the Democratic Party's wishes. And the way the media does that is that they call up Facebook or Google or Twitter and they say, we've noticed that you're allowing this kind of dissent on Ukraine or this disinformation about COVID to remain on your site. Shouldn't you be removing it? Don't your rules require its removal? If you don't remove it, we're going to write an article, as they've done many times, accusing these big tech companies of having blood on their hands or being reckless for allowing too much free speech. And these big tech companies know and often note that the pressure to censor is coming not only from the Democratic-controlled Biden administration, but also from their Democratic allies in the corporate media. Here is one of the emails that we showed you last night that is part of what was released by the Judiciary Committee. That is an internal memo written by a top-level Facebook official to the two top executives at Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. And he wrote, quote, "We are seeking your guidance on whether to take more aggressive action against certain vaccine discouraging content." And then here's what he just told them is the reason they're feeling so much pressure. Quote, "We are facing continued pressure from external stakeholders, including the White House and the press, to remove more COVID-19 vaccine discouraging content." Now, we're so accustomed to this that I think sometimes we overlook just how twisted and surreal and bizarre it is that the media has taken the leading role in demanding greater censorship of the internet. Because a traditional value of journalists is supposed to be a defense of free inquiry and free speech and a free press, basic First Amendment rights. As I've noted many times, having journalists urge censorship is like seeing a cardiologist urge more cigarette smoking. It's completely anathema to what they claim their function is. And yet, it's so easy to demonstrate, and obviously Facebook perceives that so much of the pressure to censor more is coming not just from the Democratic Party and the White House and the CIA, but also, as they say, from the press itself. Now, it seems clear that Oliver Darcy, who is one of the most dishonest partisan operatives in the entire corporate media, seemed eager to step forward today and prove just how corrupted the corporate media has become, because the article or so-called news analysis that he wrote was essentially a manifesto in favor of censorship and a defense of the Democratic Party in the White House when it comes to this censorship. It's filled with lies. But that's not notable. The CNN often lies, but what's really notable here is just how willing he was to drop the mask on any pretense of objectivity or neutrality, and he just wrote a DNC talking point screed in defense of the censorship regime, half denying it and half defending it. Now, I don't know if we have the video, but a couple of nights ago, a Republican congressman went on to CNN and the host told him that, look, I don't have any political opinions. And he laughed in her face. And I just want to show you this video because it demonstrates that the gig is up in terms of the ability of the corporate media to pretend any longer that they don't have sides, that they're not allies with a certain political party, that they don't have allegiance, supreme allegiance to a particular political ideology, that they're just neutral arbiters calling balls and strikes. Let's look at this video before we show you Oliver Darcy's defense of the Biden administration at CNN, because it's so revealing of what the real role of the corporate media is.
I just want to be really clear, Congressman. Congressman, look, nothing has been made public yet that shows us all of this. When and if it is, we will get back to you. We'd love to talk to you if you have the evidence to show. But at this point, we haven't seen, the public hasn't seen any of this hard evidence that has been brought up by members. I don't know what,
you have $10 million coming from Burisma, a company, they're accusing Biden they accused Trump of doing what Biden actually did, $10 million of bribery. And they fired a guy. I mean, you can follow the money, ma'am. And these are FBI informants. These are FBI.
Right, but it has to be proven. There has to be some proof. You can't just say it happened. There has to be some proof, right?
Well, what was the dossier on Trump? There wasn't really any proof. It was all hearsay. And now here you've got an FBI document, an official document showing that. So, we can sit here and argue about it, and I get it. You've got your base, I've got mine, but I've seen the
I don't have a base. I'm a journalist. I don't have a base, Democrat or Republican.
I understand, ma'am. You work for CNN, but let's be honest. If you work for Fox, it'd be the right wing, and you all are the left wing. And I get it.
We're not.
It's politics,
I'm not.
as usual, ma'am.
You don't know my politics, sir. You really don't know my politics.
Nobody believes that, ma'am. You can say that, and you can have your fingers crossed under.
But again, there has to be proof, sir. There has to be proof, both with my politics and with whether or not Joe Biden is involved in this. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you talking about UAPs and the issue with Hunter Biden. I appreciate you coming on, sir.
So there she was, just aggressively defending the Biden administration, saying that you have no proof for your allegations of corruption against Joe Biden. There's no proof at all. And he laughed in her face and basically said, look, I know you have your base and I have mine. And she said, sir, I don't have a base. I'm a journalist. And he told her exactly what was appropriate, which is he laughed at that and said, nobody believes that anymore, ma'am. And it's absolutely true. Nobody believes that CNN is a journalistic outlet. And if you do, with apologies, you've been incredibly propagandized or misled, because everything CNN does reeks of partisan allegiance. And I can't think of a better example than this news article that Oliver Darcy, one of the worst partisan liars in all of corporate media, wrote today about the extremely compelling evidence that the House Judiciary Committee released yesterday that we walked you through last night, showing how aggressive the White House is when demanding censorship from Facebook. Here is what he wrote. I think it's really worth watching. There's the headline on the CNN site, "The real reason Republicans are forcing Mark Zuckerberg to turn over thousands of pages of Facebook documents. It's not because they have the responsibility of exercising oversight over the White House and the intelligence community to prove how aggressively they're demanding censorship from big tech. No, there's the real reason that Oliver Darcy, the Democratic activist and pro-censorship agitator dressed up as a journalist, is about to reveal to you." This is what he writes, quote, "The hyper-partisan Ohio Republican," I mean, the irony of Oliver Darcy calling anybody else hyper-partisan is off the charts. "The hyper-partisan Ohio Republican, still on an unsuccessful years-long journey to dishonestly portray Silicon Valley as unfairly censoring American conservatives." This is a news article. And look at how many adjectives, partisan adjectives, he used just in the first introductory clause of the first paragraph. "The hyper-partisan Ohio Republican," that's Jim Jordan, "still on an unsuccessfully year-long journey to dishonestly portray Silicon Valley as unfairly censoring American conservatives, is now wielding the power of the federal government in his quest to besmirch Meta." That's all one sentence. Every phrase designed to say that the Republicans are liars, the Democrats are truthful, there's no censorship regime, and this is all about unfairly smirching Meta by trying unsuccessfully to prove that there's a censorship regime in place. He goes on, Jordan, who sits atop the powerful House Judiciary Committee, has embarked on a fishing expedition at Facebook, demanding Zuckerberg turn over reams of internal documents that pertain to Meta's content moderation decisions. Jordan will then selectively post portions of those very documents on Elon Musk's rival platform X to advance the narrative that Facebook is a supposed anti-free speech social media network working in collusion with the Democrats and media elite to tilt the scales against the GOP. In effect, Jordan is coercing Zuckerberg into turning over documents that will then be used to mendaciously smear the Meta the Meta chief's company. And if Zuckerberg fails to comply, Jordan has threatened to hold him in contempt of Congress, an action that would carry with it serious legal consequences. Yes, that's what Congress is supposed to do. They're supposed to subpoena documents relevant to the public interest, such as how much the U.S. government has been pressuring big tech to censor, and then they're supposed to release those documents, and if the companies don't comply with the subpoena, they're supposed to suffer legal consequences. That's exactly how things are supposed to work. He goes on, quote, "The documents that Jordan ultimately obtained and posted on Thursday were far from surprising. They showed that the White House in 2021 had applied pressure on Meta to keep its platforms clean of COVID vaccine disinformation, something that was already well known given that the White House had staked a public position on such measures during the pandemic. In fact, President Joe Biden even went as far as to accuse Facebook of, quote, killing people in its efforts to press the social media company to do more to tackle dangerous vaccine information and conspiracy theories on its platform." So he begins by saying there is no censorship regime. There's an unsuccessful effort by Jim Jordan to prove that there is one. It's all based on lies. And then he goes on to say, of course there's a censorship regime. We already knew that. And it's totally justified. And we should be grateful for it because President Biden is simply trying through this censorship to keep us free of disinformation. He goes on, quote, "Jordan, however, predictably hyped the documents in a much different light, dubbing them the Facebook files, a ripoff of the Musk-orchestrated Twitter files, which also failed to provide any smoking gun evidence proving government collusion in the Hunter Biden case." I mean, every report that is in any way incriminating to the Democratic Party or the U.S. security state, Oliver Darcy is there to malign. Quote, "Jordan tweeted X in all caps that he had, quote, smoking gun evidence proving Facebook censored Americans because of Biden White House pressure." Here's a really revealing paragraph. Quote, "Most news organizations gave Jordan's Facebook file entry little attention on Thursday." Exactly. They essentially ignored it, as they do every time there's a story incriminating of Joe Biden or the U.S. security state. But as you might expect, right-wing media outlets hyped the stunt. Fox News, for instance, featured a story on the documents released as a top story on its website, and Jordan was welcomed on the network's air to further promote his narrative without scrutiny. It was a helpful distraction on a day in which new charges against Donald Trump commanded the attention of the nation's biggest newsrooms. We are about to live through the Twitter files era all over again, except this time around, Facebook and Instagram will be on center stage. Notably, the documents are not being made available to the public because of an erratic billionaire owner who purchased the company and legally acquired the material. In this case, the awesome powers of the federal government are being weaponized to threaten Zuckerberg into handing the information over. Now, the lies and the partisanship ooze off of every word of that article. I don't feel it necessary to dignify it by dissecting every paragraph. But I want to show you one video that by itself completely destroys the veracity of everything that Democratic Party pro-censorship activist claims. He cast Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook as victims of the House Judiciary investigation and cast the censorship claims that the U.S. government is applying censorship pressure to Facebook as totally false. And yet, as we showed you last night, and as we're going to show you again, it was the CEO of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg himself, who publicly complained about the endless censorship pressures applied by the Biden administration to include not only disinformation, as Oliver Darcy claimed falsely, but also content that Facebook itself knew was either debatable or claims that turned out to be true. So you have Facebook saying the Biden administration tried to force us to censor content and viewpoints that were actually true. And then Oliver Darcy claims on CNN that Mark Zuckerberg is a victim because none of this ever happened and this is just the Biden White House trying to protect us from disinformation. Let's look at what Mark Zuckerberg himself said in June.
So misinformation, I think, has been a really tricky one because there are things that are kind of obviously false, right, that are maybe factual, but may not be harmful. So it's like, all right, are you going to censor someone for just being wrong? It's, if there's no kind of harm implication of what they're doing, I think there's a bunch of real kind of issues and challenges there. But then I think that there are other places where it is, just take some of the stuff around COVID earlier on in the pandemic, where there were, real health implications, but there hadn't been time to fully vet a bunch of the scientific assumptions. And, unfortunately, I think a lot of the kind of establishment on that, kind of waffled on a bunch of facts and, asked for a bunch of things to be censored that in retrospect ended up being, more debatable or true. And that stuff is really tough, right? And really undermines trust in that. And
so Oliver Darcy purported to be defending Mark Zuckerberg from unfair attacks. The problem is that Mark Zuckerberg himself sees himself as a victim of the Biden White House and the Biden administration's attempt to censor not disinformation, but valid debates and even true dissent off of Facebook. And we see from these internal Facebook documents how angry and concerned Facebook was internally about this endless censorship pressure that they believed was inappropriate. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.